Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 4 o'clock. Thank you to my colleagues for being able to be available, and to staff and to anybody in the public that's watching now or may watch back later. So thank you very much for joining us. We are here under the matter as titled 797 Victoria Road North. Should have had that memorized by now. It is not Groundhog Day. But let's do our normal agenda process here, which is I'll ask the clerk to throw our country's flag up on the screen there for a moment to reflect on. And then I'll come back for the rest of our pre-agenda items. Great, thank you. And then just a moment of silent reflection before we continue, please. Great, thank you very much, everyone. And our territorial acknowledgement. As we are gathered, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we both live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or any general nature thereof on the item? Hearing and seeing none. So we have a delegation. We have one that signed up, Luke Weiler. And so I just wondered if Mr. Weiler is available by phone right now. Can you hear me, Luke? Okay. Okay, we're still trying to connect. Okay.
Just for council's benefit, if we're just continuing to connect, obviously, with the emergency meeting. This has been sort of fairly quick, but we're going to work to connect with Mr. Weiler, and if we can just pause for a few moments to let the team connect,
Yep.
make sure that we at least attempt to get him in and give him the opportunity to connect.
Okay. Oh, he might be in now. Luke Weiler, I was just told that you might be connected. Can you hear my voice? It's Mayor Guthrie.
Yes, Mayor Guthrie, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through very clearly. So thank you very much for signing up and joining us today. I know as an emergency meeting and not maybe quite sure what what the topic is or the issue we're going to be looking at. I still appreciate you joining us. So I just wouldn't mind just kind of giving you the parameter of why I called the meeting, just very high level, just so you're kind of staying within the lane as much as you can on the subject matter. But you do have 5 minutes. I know you've delegated here before, so I'll let you have that that time as soon as I'm done. So just so you know, it's very procedural. Is the reason why I've called the meeting, because it was a procedural issue that was raised to me, which is why we're here again. So I'm not trying to get at this point into anything in regards to heritage value or the heritage committee. And by the way, I'm just saying those as examples, not that they don't have value. I'm just saying that that's not sort of why we're here. It's very procedural in nature. So with that sort of theme, I hope you didn't mind me just giving you a little bit of context. I'll mute and I'll start my clock for you, and you can go right ahead. Okay.
Just before you do that, Mayor, if I can ask, what will
Sure.
be the motion that's proposed to council today? I'm looking at the agenda and there's still no attachments on the public website.
Yeah, so it's as a procedural issue, there is looking at either confirming what occurred at last Thursday's meeting or not. It's actually that clear.
Is there a text of the motion that I could ask for?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm happy to put that up. And I haven't started your time, by the way.
No, I appreciate that. I just I'm quite happy to delegate to council. I'm just trying to find out what council is going to be talking about. I don't want to misuse council's time.
For sure. Did you have an idea why you were delegating then?
I'm doing my best. I mean, I've got some concerns about process generally, but
Sure.
I think I may have concerns about the motion once I've seen what it is.
Okay. Let me just, again, I haven't started the time, being respectful of that and the nuances with an emergency meeting. I appreciate the grace that you're kind of giving to us too, right? So I think the clerk's going to bring it up. Yep, go ahead. Okay, here it is. Now, may I just ask to you, Luke, can you see it or do you need me to read it?
So
Mr. Mayor,
I'm
we may have a
watching
bit of
on
a
the
delay.
live stream of council. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
see it displayed yet.
It might be a little bit of a delay, and I think the clerk wanted to say something even during the delay anyway, so go ahead to the clerk.
Mr. Weiler, apologies, because you're on the phone and likely watching online, there might be a little bit of a delay as it gets through the live stream. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, but we'll keep it up until presumably the mayor or you let us know that you can see it.
Oh, thank you. No, I can see it now. It's just appeared on the live stream.
Yeah. I'll just read it out
Okay.
loud just so the public can hear it too, just in case they're listening, okay? That council affirms the proceedings of the special city council meeting held on September 30th, 2021, as presented in the draft minutes prepared by the city clerk in accordance with section 2281 of the Municipal Act and posted to guelph.ca.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'm ready if council is ready, Mayor Guthrie.
Yep, not a problem. I'm going to hit the start button right now. Go for it.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try not to take up too much time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. I think I want to share with council some concerns I have about process, and I'm speaking as a citizen. My feeling is that the public, I don't think is getting enough information about how the decisions have been made in this kind of concatenated process. The initial meeting on the 27th of September was mostly conducted in camera. And we know as the public that some kind of problem occurred as part of that process, and that led to the emergency meeting, which took place 3 days later. Again, many parts of that meeting were also held in camera, so the public didn't get a lot of information about what council was hearing and why it made the decisions it made. We learned afterwards from comments in the paper that the problem seems to be that Heritage Guelph wasn't consulted before the city removed 797 Victoria from the Heritage Register. There is a letter to the paper in Guelph today by Mr. Alex Smith. If councillors haven't read that letter, I'd strongly encourage them to. I'm not necessarily endorsing the conclusions, but Mr. Smith concludes that because council didn't consult Heritage Guelph, the city didn't meet its obligations under the Heritage Act, and the decision to remove the farmhouse from the register could be a nullity. I don't have a position on that. I don't know if that's true, and I'm not saying that, but it is concerning to read that in the paper from, a fellow citizen. And now, here council's today on its second emergency meeting in a week to address problems that seem to have been caused by the last emergency meeting. And I'm just, I'm concerned about the process. The advice that council is getting is not being shared with the community. The deliberations are not taking place in public. Honestly, I'm not understanding why the discussions are happening in camera in the way that they have been. And that's just because, from the perspective of someone who's not part of those discussions, it seems like we're talking about a heritage building. It doesn't seem like we're talking about pending litigation or an HR issue. So I'm just not sure why it's happening so much behind closed doors. And these emergency meetings, with the greatest respect to both, council and mayor and staff, I don't know if they're appropriate. Councils are part-time, quasi-volunteers. They need time to properly prepare themselves for these meetings, get feedback from the constituents, and it's very difficult for the public to understand what's happening and to participate in these. I only found out about this meeting very, very recently. I had to clear my afternoon to make time to be available for this. I guess what I'm saying is that I'm concerned about this process. You're having a second emergency meeting of council to correct a mistake that was made in an earlier emergency meeting, which itself seems to have been called to correct yet another mistake, which was made following some kind of procedural problem. And just, as a citizen from the outside, this doesn't look like the governance that we expect. I'm just not understanding how a second emergency meeting on short notice is the correct response to what's been going on. My proposal to you, I'm not sure if this is in order, would be that I think that no more steps should probably be taken today except for passing a motion to just secure the site at 797 Victoria and allow us to go through a more proper process, which would include consultation with Heritage Guelph, having a public meeting in which we get to understand the advice that council's being given and in which the public can comment on that. And just, as a very, very kind of short remark, the motion that I read before I began speaking, it looks like it has the feel of a motion to ratify an earlier decision. I'm not a parliamentarian, but I have chaired my share of meetings, and I respectfully submit that I don't actually know that it's in order, because it sounds like a deliberative body is being asked to approve a decision that it already made in order. And I don't think that that's appropriate. That's the kind of motion you'd normally have to either have a body approve of a decision made by a subordinate authority like a committee, or if quorum wasn't present. But neither of those things are true, and I'm not actually sure how that motion could be in order, because it raises the question: what happens if the motion's defeated? I leave that to you as councillors and to the mayor to discuss and consider. But I haven't heard a reason why the site can't just simply be secured and put a tarp on the roof and have a security guard make sure no one goes in until it can go through the proper process. That's all I have to say. I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Yep, thank you very much, Luke. And just let me see if there's a follow-up. That was your 5 minutes. Nothing for you, so thank you. We can let you get back to work, and thank you for taking the time off, as you said, in the day to delegate to the matter.
Okay, you guys all be well.
Thanks, you as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So before we do anything further, I would like to just make some comments. Why are we here again? And look at my members of council. I mean, you probably are you're much more up to date about what's happening. We kind of live and breathe this, and there's been conversations happening about why we're here, but the public may not understand fully why. And so I'm going to take the time to just lay out sort of the reasons why. Oh my goodness, the mayor's called another emergency meeting, and so I think it's only fair if you could just give me a little bit of time here, just to lay of the land for the public to understand from a transparency point of view why we're here again. So I guess to start, I will go back to last Thursday, and what occurred, why that meeting happened last Thursday. Well, that meeting happened last Thursday. I called that meeting because, as I said already publicly, all of council was made aware of what I would define as a process issue that was missed, that we were not informed of in regards to Heritage Committee, Guelph, and consultation under the Heritage Act that should have occurred. When I found that out within the hour, I called an emergency meeting. That's why we met last Thursday. And this is where we start now on Thursday, and please bear with me, everyone. Please give me a little bit of grace here to try to explain, because it's very, very procedural. So at the beginning of that meeting, we had some questions around to the clerk around how would the evening kind of progress? How would it go if we were to look to reconsider things, bring other motions forward, things like that? And I just want to give permission to the clerk to please interrupt me if I say something wrong, okay? So the normal process for the public to understand under our procedural bylaw is that it's a little bit of a lengthy process to do what's called a notice of motion for reconsideration. It has to have its normal process, which is a few weeks, several weeks, maybe even a month, month and a half, where it goes through a process and then would come to council for consideration and etc. When at the beginning of that meeting, we had the ability to waive that process. And the way to do that is you have to suspend our procedural bylaw. And our procedural bylaw is like our guidebook. It kind of puts boundaries in place for us on how we guide ourselves as a council from a governance perspective. And so it was stated that we needed to make sure that if we wanted to look to reconsider something in the moment and not follow a normal notice of motion reconsideration process, that a suspension of the procedural bylaw would need to be taking place. And that requires a supermajority of council or 9 votes. Now, just so everyone knows, last Thursday we had a couple councillors missing, Councillor Alt and Councillor Hoffman, and so we only had 11. But a supermajority of council was still required. That passed. So we had a vote. It passed council. We had the more than the supermajority to suspend the procedural bylaw, which then enables us to look to reconsider something if we wanted to, actually at that moment, if we wanted to do that, not have to go through the normal process. Now, at that time, I also asked the clerk to make sure it was being explained that that procedural bylaw suspension needed 9, and also we needed to have a supermajority or 9 when it comes to a reconsideration as well. And it was stated verbally before anything went on the screen at all. It was stated verbally a couple of times from the clerk that yes, that's the process. You need 9. At that time, the clerk then, after verbally saying that, put up on the screen an actual motion, and there was a mistake in that screen, in that capture of the screen. And maybe, is this a good time to hand it off to you? Do you mind, Stephen? Because
Sure, certainly, Mr.
I don't
Mayor.
want to
Yeah.
say the wrong thing about kind of what occurred there. So.
Yeah. So maybe just for council's benefit and the public awareness again, I do want to acknowledge that there was an incorrect reference on the clauses from the procedural bylaw that were referenced in what we call an in-meeting motion template. That's the screen that comes up on the screen for council at the September 30th meeting. To Mayor Guthrie's commentary, council proceeded on September 30th to work through the 797 Victoria Road item on the agenda, including some information enclosed, as you're all well aware. It was verbally shared with council that suspension of rules and reconsideration both require 2/3 majority votes of the whole. There was a question from Councillor McKinnon in regards to, if I remember correctly, it was in regards to, was there a need to suspend rules? My commentary to that effect was yes, there was, because one of those clauses on reconsiderations says that council needs to land at a reconsideration via a notice of motion, which is as you all know, and as the public may not be aware, is a prolonged process where notice is provided on an agenda, etc. That clause was one of the clauses that was waived and was correctly referenced, which allowed council to make to have that item land before you at that meeting on September 30th without notice. And so that's the reference I made and offered to Councillor McKinnon in regards to the section of the bylaw to waive rules around reconsideration included that clause, amongst several others. This was also echoed, the clauses for 2/3 majority of the whole of council, or 9 members, was echoed by yourself, Mayor Guthrie, in advance of the vote that was taken. So after council rose out of closed, you considered reconsideration of the motion that was carried on September 27th. That required, as you alluded to at the meeting, 9 votes. Following a 7-4 vote, as chair, Mr. Mayor, you declared the motion defeated, as per that reference and commentary that the vote required 9 votes. What I'll say is that my role as clerk is to record the proceedings of council, and despite that incorrect reference in the in-meeting motion template, those are based on the rulings of the chair predominantly, what council did, the actions they took, and the ruling of the chair at the conclusion of that motion and that meeting. One thing I want to make I think I made clear, and there's certainly obviously some policy and perhaps some language that we need to include on them, but the in-meeting motion template was never and is never intended to form the official record of council's decision and deliberations. Rather, it's intended to serve as a tool to support council's deliberations. We often receive motions in the moment in a meeting. We will often make minor corrective administrative changes, grammatical and punctuation. I mean that in the greatest respect to council in the moment as motions come in. We're often dealing with in-meeting motion templates that come in very important discussions like budget, and we have to validate and verify what's included in those. And so those are never intended to be a final record. Again, we base the minutes on the whole encapsulation and the ruling of the chair at a meeting as the final record of what occurred at that meeting. And so that's hence the minutes were recorded in such a way that it confirmed and affirmed what was carried out at the meeting, where you, Mr. Mayor, as chair, declared the 7-4 vote as defeated because it didn't achieve the 2/3 majority. Maybe to add a little bit of levity to the situation, council will recall prior to us using these screens, we've certainly used the in-meeting motion template a lot more during COVID. You'll require that you'll recall that you used to fill out a little piece of paper and we would walk around the horseshoe and collect that paper, and oftentimes the mayor would read it, and again, with complete respect to council, would read it with whatever form it was in. So the intent of the in-meeting motion template is really just to aid in the deliberations. It's never meant to be the final record, and that incorrect reference in that is just something that was I wanted to acknowledge. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you if there's any other commentary that you want to offer, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well, obviously.
Okay. So thank you to the clerk. So saying all that is kind of continue the story. So saying all of that, the motion as I saw it last Thursday, I called it that it didn't pass because it was 7 and we needed 9. And you know, I know I was one of the 7 that actually wanted to pursue the process. I was under the impression, of course, that I lost. That's the way votes happen with the will of council, and we move on. Like that's the way it happens. So now, fast forward to yesterday. So I've taken you from Thursday to yesterday. So yesterday I made aware of this incorrect letter put up on the screen after the clerk referenced the 2/3 requirement. The screen comes up, and I need to be specific here, but if you can believe it, there's kind of different sections, and one section has the letter G, and the letter G was the mistake. It should not have had that up on the screen. So regardless of the verbal twice, and regardless of the verbal twice again before the vote was taken, that screen had the letter G on it. And there's conflict there, and I admit that. There's conflict between what was on the screen based on verbal, and so that's why we're here today. I'm here today from a procedural point of view to ask my colleagues, because we make a decision as a team, which way do you want to go? If you procedurally agree that last week happened correctly, that we know, and I'm going to present sort of both cases here as much as I can, but that we all kind of know what's required for a supermajority. Like we kind of know that for reconsideration. It's been that way forever. It was verbally stated many times, and we voted and we didn't get 9, and it's done. And then the other side of it is saying, oh, but wait a second, that the G was in that original motion, and I thought some of them are saying I thought that maybe that G then referenced a future motion, which then wouldn't require the 9. And so that conflict is not something that I can just be, I can't dismiss that as the mayor. I cannot dismiss that as the chair. I have an obligation now to say to us as a team, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to say that what happened last Thursday happened as it was and in accordance with the rules? Or do you want to say, no, I believe that that letter G up there constitutes enough of a reason to say we need to go back? And that's, I think I've laid it out as factual as I can.
Just-
Did I? Okay,
Just
you go ahead, and then I know the CIO wants to
yes.
say something, and then I do want to make sure that I get the motion up and we kind of get moving. And happy to. I'm not trying to stop anybody, but I want to keep moving on it. So go to
Yes,
the
and
clerk.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's not one for me to sort of raise my hand often and ask to sort of interrupt. The one thing, I think everything was captured accurately. The one thing I will say is, had the reconsideration on Thursday carried in the affirmative of 9, and had you ruled on that, really council would have been facing 3 votes at that meeting. And for me, I think that's important for council to understand, because of the reference to every other vote after that would have been a simple majority. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I've had some questions come in that regard. The first vote was required a supermajority, 2/3 of the whole of council, to suspend rules. The second vote would have also, as per council's bylaw as it's written now, require 2/3 supermajority of the whole of council, 9 members, to open up a reconsideration. Once the reconsideration is opened, a simple majority can be passed in a way that could affect change to what was originally done. So remember, for council's benefit, once a reconsideration is approved in a 2/3 majority vote, it's akin to council rewinding time back right before that last vote was taken, and you can then adopt a matter as a simple majority. So when I think I recall being asked, or I recall saying something to the effect that once the reconsideration votes, or once the supermajority votes are taken, council can decide what to do in this case with 797 Victoria Road and the approach that you wish to take with a simple majority of 7 votes. So I know that's really nitpicky, but I just wanted to clarify that, because I think that may have been a question that some may have.
Okay, so let me go. Let me. I just go. I see your hand, Councillor Alt, for sure. But let me and Karan for sure. Let me get the motion up on the screen, and because that's why I called the meeting from a procedural point of view. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, and then I will go to Councillor Alt, and then I will go to Councillor Karan. Or yeah, I guess I could, Scott. I'm sorry, I forgot about you. Did you want to say something, or did you want to just go ahead? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief so that you can have at this. And I certainly appreciate your overview as well as the acknowledgement from our city clerk tonight on the incorrect reference that we've just received from Stephen. And I think with that and the email earlier today, where you got a bit of a detail on a minute-by-minute overview of the public video from September 30th, is good context for you, of course. And you would observe this, but I just want to say it out loud. As you can tell from this file, there is a level of complexity to governance that's just not September 30th. And regardless of where we end up tonight, as a reminder, I committed last week to review the process and acknowledge any policy gaps and get them corrected. So that will include whatever happens this evening as well. But I just wanted to put that into context, because I did commit that to you, and it'll happen. Obviously, it's not happening right this moment, but we're going to have a review of everything that from the beginning of this to how we ended up to September 30th, and then perhaps including this evening as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will put my mask back on and sit and listen and take direction from council this evening.
Thank you for reminding me about that. So let me put the motion up on the screen, please. Okay, I've already read it out earlier. And is there a mover for that motion? Okay, Councillor McKinnon, is there a seconder for that motion?
Happy to second it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right, sure, Councillor Gibson. And okay, let me go to the list to Councillor Alt and then Councillor Karan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a point of order, but you can put me on the list for comments later on. The point of order that I have is an important one, because there's been so much discussion of weighted votes. I am asking, because this is again a special meeting, what is the weighting of this vote? I noted that the weighting of votes in the last special meeting were 2/3. Consequently, I want to know if we are ratifying this? Is this a 2/3 or 50% simple majority vote?
So it is 7, but I'm going to have the clerk just confirm that. Okay.
With masks. What I would say, yes, is it is 7 to confirm the mayor's commentary. It is a 7 vote to carry, a simple majority. What is important about this motion as it's crafted now and as it was shared with us is that this motion would affirm the proceedings of September 30th, Thursday's meeting, if carried in the affirmative. It's carried if it's defeated, then effectively it's saying the minutes that are captured in draft form, as prepared by myself and as sort of as alluded to based on the proceedings of the meeting on Thursday. Essentially, if it's not carried and it's defeated, then it in a way says that G on that in-meeting motion template was in fact in play, that council waived their requirement for a 2/3 majority on reconsiderations as part of the suspension of rules that happened on the September 30th meeting. And the vote then at a 7-4 moment to reconsider then would technically stand. And in effect, you would have the opportunity at that moment to pursue whichever path you wish to choose. I will again say this, and again, the reference on the in-meeting motion template aside, council's bylaw does require 2/3 supermajority vote for suspension of rules and a 2/3 supermajority vote for reconsideration. Very clearly in the bylaw, very clearly in the table, the motions table at the end of the bylaw, the last page of the bylaw. It's the only 2 clauses in the bylaw that require a 2/3 majority. And so, again, I say this often, without presupposing council's wishes, there is the awareness that council should have about the potential of defeating a motion and its impact on next steps. And I think that's just something that Mr. Mayor, you should be aware of, and you can help dialogue with council through. We're happy to do that. You don't have to vote on this immediately. You can dialogue it and ask other questions if need be.
No, back to Councillor Alt.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. Just, I'm going to follow up on that because I'm in a situation where I don't have the minutes in front of me as part of this meeting. And as a consequence of that, the record of that meeting is not available to me at this point, or to the public per se for this meeting. I'm actually failing to see how we can vote on something where I'm essentially being asked to support what I think happened.
No problem. We'll pull the minutes up and we'll let you see it. But you can probably understand the gist of it is minus 1 letter, the letter G.
So, Mr. Mayor, I will, per your direction, I'll share the screen right now for the minutes from, confirm this right, yes, September 30th. So for the public's benefit, and I will zoom in on this as well. If you give me just a moment. Okay, I'm going to sort of be a little bit delayed in things because I want to make sure that it's capturing up and catching up to a live stream, but effectively the attendance of who was at the meeting, followed by the call to order, suspension of rules, carried on 11-0 vote. That was a supermajority requirement. Then council moved into a closed session for the purpose of section 2392A and F, security of the property of the municipality or local board, and to receive advice that was subject to solicitor-client privilege and communications necessary for that purpose. Those items were discussed. You then sought disclosure of pecuniary interest. There was none at that time. These are the items that were discussed in closed. Sorry, a disclosure was asked in closed, and then the topic of 797 Victoria Road North was addressed. We convened council in open at 5:28. The mayor, you gave a summary of what was discussed, that you received information and you were given direction to report out in open. That happened later in the meeting. And then a vote to reconsider. So again, this is now the second vote, a 2/3 vote initially. pardon me, a 2/3 vote initially to suspend rules. This was the second 2/3 vote. If this was to carry in the affirmative, then council could have basically rewinded back to the time on September 27th when you consider this matter. That is recorded as defeated 7-4 because it did not meet the 2/3 majority test. At that point, Mayor Guthrie, you explained some reasoning further to council's direction and closed. And CAO Stewart also offered some closing remarks or ending remarks. A confirmatory bylaw was adopted, as is the case with every council meeting, and adjournment occurred at 5:38 p.m.
Thank you for taking us through that and for having it
Thank you.
on the screen. Go back to you, Councillor Alt.
Thank you. And this will be my final remark before I get on comments. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. That was a real speed read. I do have some concerns about it. Just on the record, as I was not present at the meeting, I am not, until I hear from my colleagues, capable of making a decision on these minutes, whether I approve or reject them until some discussion has occurred.
Thank you. And Councillor Karan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as this discussion, and notwithstanding my respect for the clerk, it actually doesn't matter whether the clerk said that there was a typographical error. It's irrelevant. And it doesn't matter if members of council thought that they were voting on something else. It doesn't matter that this motion on the screen didn't include the supermajority clause. It doesn't matter if the CAO thinks that what he believes the motion meant. It doesn't matter because it was my motion. I was the mover of the motion. It wasn't the clerk's motion. The clerk can't make motions. I moved it. It was seconded. It's up to the seconder to verify whether they understood. But I moved what I felt was the motion on the screen. And I moved what was written on the screen, and I moved what was read out loud. I knew what it meant at that time. And my intent was to suspend the clause requiring a supermajority. If other members of council did not understand my motion or my intent, then they should have called a point of procedure or asked for clarification, but that's their problem and not mine. I knew what that motion meant, and I'll tell you the reason why I knew what that motion meant, because at the beginning of the meeting, and I've looked and again, greatest respect for the clerk and our CAO, who provided us with a breakdown of the transcript earlier today, where different things were said at different times. What wasn't included in that transcript that we received earlier today was actual verbal clarification from the clerk at the 3-minute and 6-second mark, which I've provided all of this to council just in advance of this meeting, only because I just typed all the transcript out, so I apologize that was late. But what was said, and I quote, there are opportunities, it was in response to a question you asked, Mr. Mayor, about what we were doing. And the clerk replied, there are opportunities also for waiving the rules or suspending rules of procedure in order to allow reconsiderations if that is a process council wishes to follow. And we have some draft motions to that effect for council to consider. The draft motions at that moment were displayed on screen and read out loud by you, Mr. Mayor. And as the mover, I raised my hand, and these are the resolutions that I moved. I moved the resolutions based on the clerk's commentary that included clause G. At the 6:24 mark, in response to Councillor McKinnon's question about what are we ratifying here today, the response was, and I quote, this motion that has been moved and seconded and is on the floor is suspending the rules of procedure around reconsideration, which allows for council to reconsider that was passed, considered, and resolved on Monday evening. That's what this section of suspension of rules is doing. So it doesn't matter that later in the meeting, His advice at that time too was that the 2/3 majority was required to pass this resolution. So I accept that as that is true. After this passed with a supermajority, clauses A to G and I were now in effect. Later in the meeting at the 8-minute mark, when you said we need 9 votes, it's moot. That point is moot because this resolution, A to G, had already been carried. So if your interpretation was different than what my interpretation was, I'm sorry that that's the fact. But as the mover of the motion, my intent was very clear. And I think that the intent of the mover is a primary consideration here today. If my colleagues did not understand my intent, again, that's their, they should have clarified that intent. But my intent was very clear. It was verbal, it was written, and it was clarified in a verbal way that included the words reconsideration when the clerk introduced the draft motion on the screen. We are in a public forum here today. We are being asked to ratify minutes that do not jive with my understanding of what transpired. We cannot pass minutes that do not reflect the business of council. And I don't know what else to say. Again, as the mover, my intent was clear. And I will not be supporting any motion that asks me to approve minutes that do not reflect what actually occurred and is recorded.
So I do need to ask right back to you, Councillor Cron. And again, I just want everyone to know, Councillor Cron and I, we've been dialoguing back and forth very respectfully. And so this is not like personal, it's all about procedure and what's happening in policy. So I just want to clarify all that. But I find your interpretation of it difficult to accept, that if you're explaining today that that was your intention, then why is it that I said twice at 16:21 in the meeting, the mayor confirms that we now require a supermajority of the whole of council and that we need 9 votes. I said that twice. And then before calling the vote, I said, anything further on this? And you didn't say anything. And sorry, respectfully. So you're telling us that, a half an hour earlier, before we went in camera, that your intention was we only needed 7, that we could have waived that, and by the way, we've never waived that before in our lives, ever. But yeah, I meant to do that. So then why then in the open session, when I said it out loud, we need 9 votes, I said it twice, and I gave an opportunity for anybody to say anything before calling the vote, and you didn't say anything. And then the vote fails. I say the vote fails. You still didn't say anything. So I don't understand how your passion today can be like, well, my intention was that I knew what I was doing a half an hour earlier. I knew exactly that G motion should have been up there. I knew exactly what I was doing, but then with like 3 or 4 opportunities, you never raised it on an issue that we've never done as a council. We've never, ever done this as a council, ever, to consider a reconsideration with just 7 votes. Anyways, I just wanted to tell you what I want you to respond. I want you to respond. Yep, absolutely.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for asking those questions, because you and I actually had that discussion earlier today. I believe there have been cases where we've suspended Clause G before in the past, but I don't have those available to me. So later in the meeting, when you made a statement about we need 9 votes, or the actual wording, and I've watched it over and over and over again, and again I encourage the public to watch the video. And you called for, you did say, and we need 9 votes. I honestly, you were talking about normal procedure, and we had already suspended the bylaws at that point. So again, I felt no need to call a point of procedure because I felt it was understood that we had suspended that clause. When you called the vote defeated, if you recall, I raised my hand. I was frantically looking, and again, we've discussed this. I was frantically looking for a copy of the motion so that I could refer to it. I was looking for a paper copy of the motion. I was looking for a screenshot of the motion, which I did not have because it was verbal and came down from the screen. I was frantically looking for, and you can see in the video, my eyes are on my laptop looking for a copy of the motion so that I could call a point of procedure. In the absence of being able to do that, because I did not have a copy of the motion in front of me, I did not feel that I could justifiably call a point of procedure because I didn't have the evidence that I needed before me. However, at the same time, I was frantically looking for information about how this could be appealed because I recognized that I didn't have a copy of the motion, and I raised my hand. And I raised my hand, and you acknowledged my hand, and you verbally said, wait one moment, quote. And you wanted to allow some comments from the CAO at the time. I waited a moment respectfully, and I let the CAO summarize what had just occurred. As soon as the CAO's comments were concluded, I expected to be recognized so that I could bring this point forward. Councillor Gibson actually also raised his hand at that time, and he was immediately cut off and said, nope, the meeting's over. And one of my fellow councillors, Councillor Billings, immediately went on the mic and declared, it's over, it's over, it's over. And the bylaws were brought on the floor, voted on, and adjourned all within the span of minutes. So, you know, to be blunt, Mr. Mayor, I never had the opportunity to appropriately raise this point of procedure. The minutes and the video were not available over the weekend. As soon as I knew, I couldn't pinpoint exactly what went wrong at that meeting at that time because I had nothing in writing to go on. So it wasn't until it was brought to my attention that the G clause was not in the minutes. When the minutes were posted and G wasn't there, and then I was able to go back and watch the video, that's when I knew. And that's when I immediately brought it to your attention. And I brought it to your attention because I wanted the opportunity for us to do the right thing here.
For this moment. Yeah.
For this to happen, for us to do the right thing. As the mover of the motion, I am very clear what my intent is. Again,
So
if my
may I
comments
ask?
weren't clear,
Mhm.
that is not my problem. If the clerk wasn't clear, it's irrelevant. The motion on the screen, the motion read out loud, and the preamble to that motion were very clear in my mind. Again, I know you've got the motion on the, we should just let council decide. I believe the seconder of the motion
Okay.
on
Yeah.
the 30th was Councillor Gordon. If Councillor Gordon as seconder had the same intent, then both the mover and the seconder are very clear in their intent. And again, a typo, it's irrelevant. I cannot ratify minutes that are incorrect. I would be
Okay.
I would not be fulfilling my obligation under the Municipal Act and my oath of office to vote in favor of minutes that I know are factually incorrect.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sorry I interrupted there for a moment. And just again, procedurally, and you use this many times, as we all have, by the way. Point of order. Point of personal privilege. I mean, I basically hear it once a meeting, at least. So at the entire time after the vote's taken, I never hear, and you all know me well enough. I hear a point of order. I stop thinking, yeah, what's up? What's going on? Like, so anyways, you are right, Councillor Cron. We have the motion in front of us. We need to look to either we agree, and I do see your hand, Councillor Downer. We either kind of agree with the validity and the weight behind what Councillor Cron's position is, as stated, or we agree that, you know, our regular sort of rules, which would normally be done, require that sorry, not three, the 9 votes or a supermajority of votes, and the vote was taken. It was stated out loud that it failed, and there was no raising of the issue at that moment. But again, I got to come back to the beginning. The obligation I have as the chair is to at least bring bring it forward for us as a team to discuss and bring clarity to. So I'm going to go to Councillor. Oh, sorry, Stephen, did you, our clerk, and then Councillor Downer, please.
Yes, and my apologies, Mr. Mayor. Just again to highlight the position and the place that those in-meeting motion templates offer for council and the tool that they are. What was read aloud in my listening to the audio, what was read aloud of what was on screen was different than what was on screen. And so the section to suspend rules was listed as that sections 5.A to G, inclusive, and I, etc. What was read was sections 5.8A and G, inclusive, and I. And I only highlight that because that to me gets at the crux of the challenge. To put the weight on the in-meeting motion template, what's shared on screen, what's read aloud, I come back to our role in facilitating this process, which is to say we record the proceedings of the meeting, the deliberations of council as they occurred, and in this, and especially in this case, the commentary and the ruling by a chair, the calling of a vote, the calling out of in favor, opposed, motion is carried, motion is defeated. That forms the crux mostly. All of these things come together to help us, but to rely solely on what was written on a screen, versus what is also said and articulated, it puts us in a position. That's really why we look at the whole collective process and proceedings of the meeting when preparing the minutes. And so that responsibility is what we carried out, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And over to you, Councillor Downer, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to say, as somebody who had seconded that motion of Councillor Caron, I just want to add, and we can all, put forward what we thought our intentions were and that, but now it's about sort of just speaking to what we actually thought that was happening last week. And I have to concur with Councillor Caron in understanding her intent and mine at that time and seconded it. Given the comments, I think it was somewhat confusing. I think there was certainly commentary about the reconsideration of the procedure that we were lifting and waiving. But if you listen to the tape, and I just did before this meeting again, even in response to Councillor McKinnon, because he was confused and about what was actually happening. And I believe Councillor Gibson asked some questions about what was actually happening. So there was a lot of people who didn't understand what was actually happening. And I think that was based on the comments that Councillor Caron has pointed out in response to Councillor McKinnon and to the public, in that, the suspending rules and procedures in order to allow reconsiderations, there was a lot of that language going on. And so when I seconded the motion, that was sort of my understanding, that it was coupled, but again, it wasn't 100% clear, but certainly I supported the intent of what Councillor Caron was. So when we came to the reconsideration, and it was said, it was definitely said that it would need the supermajority. At that time, I just assumed that, I must be wrong, because I thought the intention was that this original motion would suspend that as well. So I just want to put forward what my understanding was, and that I think it was confusing at the beginning of the meeting amongst a number of councillors what was going on, and that Councillor Caron was quite clear what her motion was, and that I understood it the same way she was, given the comments and the response to Councillor McKinnon. And what was said at the beginning, that we had these draft motions to allow reconsiderations. All that language was there. And so I just want to put that out there, that I didn't do a point of order because I thought, I must be wrong, that we need a supermajority on this. But I was surprised at that point. And I just think it was confusing earlier. So
okay, thank you.
That I just want to put forward that that's my thought. So I will
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
support the
Yeah.
minutes the way they're read, because certainly that was my understanding too at the beginning. Though certainly later when we did it, that I was clearly understood that.
Okay, thank you. And I've just been told Councillor Gibson has a question or a comment. Either one. I'm taking either. I'm taking comments basically.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So that point before a vote is taken has happened dozens of times as a council. And on dozens of times, you have given the levity of a councillor to put their hand up, not even under a point of order, to put their hand up, say, Mr. Mayor, can I have clarity on what we are voting for? That occurred at the last meeting on a number of occasions. I believe you've already recited it twice, and the clerk has confirmed that it was twice asked of you, once of Councillor McKinnon, once of me, just to confirm this requires a supermajority vote. Both times it was confirmed yes to the entire council. We all knew what we were voting for based on the verbal and based on the proceedings of council. And thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for echoing that multiple times this evening. We all understood that that vote required a supermajority vote. We're not going to solve it until we vote, Mr. Mayor. So I respectfully ask you to call the question. We have spent hours and hours and hours on procedural proceedings on this file, which are unnecessary. We are a decision-making body. Let's make a decision. I would ask you to call the vote, please.
Of privilege, Mayor Guthrie. I did ask to be put on the agenda after I heard from people.
Well, I have a mover of a motion. I have to go. A mover of a motion can occur at any time, right? So it just happened. So is there a seconder? If there's no seconder, I'll go right to you, Councillor Ault. Okay, there is a seconder. Councillor Billings? Okay. I have to call a vote, right? Yeah, I have to call a vote.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if apologies, if a question is called to call the vote, what is to occur is a simple majority, 7
votes, okay.
to permit a vote, and if it carries in the affirmative, then council's
right
first
to a
order
vote.
of business is the motion that was that is on the floor and duly moved and seconded. If it's defeated, council can continue its discussion and deliberation.
Okay, all right.
Point of order,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm gonna, yes, go ahead. Councillor McKinnon?
Thanks. I just want to get a clarification. A couple times the clerks has mentioned that it needs a vote of 7 and on also a majority. Can we get clarification how many councillors are attending this meeting? Because unless it's 13, I don't think it's 7, and I'm not counting everyone. So can I just get clarity if it's 7 or a majority of who's attending?
Yeah, we are down one councillor, I believe, Councillor Salisbury.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, still a majority of council is 7. The only caveat to that is the matter that we discussed recently around.
May I just interrupt, Clerk?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Is Councillor Bell with us?
Yes, so apologies, I was going to get to that. Councillor Bell is connected via telephone. Unfortunately, had some connection issues, so he is connected via telephone. Any vote that is taken will need to be mindful
I'll need to do an
that.
audio. Okay, all right. Thank you. So yeah, go back to you. Go ahead.
The only clarity I was going to offer again is the 2 clauses in your procedure bylaw, council's procedure bylaw, that talks about 2/3 supermajority being 9 is the whole of council, 9. So it doesn't matter if there's only 9 in attendance, then those 9, if they were to vote in that case, would if there's only 8, well then presumably that type of vote couldn't occur and it would have to wait. So in all other instances, 7 is your base majority.
Okay. So can I call the vote, please?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. Who's saying that? I'm sorry.
Councillor Gibson here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
As has been done many times, I am just asking for exactly what we are voting for. If Mr. O'Brien could please put the motion that we are voting for up on the screen, that would be terrific, just for complete clarity.
Okay.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Mayor.
In red, if you don't mind, Mr. O'Brien.
I will. The clerk can read it once it goes up on the screen.
You're going to forgive me, council, and this is exactly sort of to.
Actually, no, I don't need it to go up on the screen. We're only calling a motion on the vote to call a vote. I don't need anything to go up on the screen right now. Sorry, Councillor Gibson, I'm not going to allow that, okay? because we're calling the vote on whether we should call a vote. Okay, so that's a simple yes or no on that one. So Councillor Bell, I'll go to you then as audio first. Are you in favor of calling the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. What is your vote, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I'm ready to vote if we're just voting on whether or not to have a vote.
Yes, that's what it is. So you're in the affirmative?
Yeah, I think that we should vote on this, and so
All right.
we can get back to talking about it.
Okay, okay. And then Councillor Gibson, I don't see your hand, so I need an
Yes,
audio from
I'm in
you. I
favor
would
of
imagine
calling.
you're in favor. Okay.
I'm in favor of calling the vote.
All right, and then all those in favor on the screen, please raise your hand if you'd like to call the vote. Okay, I believe it's going to fail because it's Guthrie, Billings, and Gawler, so that fails. So we're back to the regular list, and the only person I have on the list is Councillor Alt. Go for it.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. From what I've heard so far, because I do believe that what we are doing is ratifying de facto minutes, and the minutes were not originally attached, so the public did not have the opportunity to scrutinize them as well. I feel that with the principles of due diligence and jurisprudence at stake, I cannot support this particular motion. And the test for this is very simple. It's how certain am I that a typo was all that occurred? From what I've heard, there's bantering back and forth. So I cannot say that beyond a shadow of a doubt and with certainty that the minutes that I am voting upon are actually an accurate reflection of the meeting. I've heard many things about the fire marshal, about heritage acts, and so on and so forth. I believe that we are in a dilemma because we passed something at an earlier time of which I supported, believing that I had full information. I'm not convinced anymore that we did have that information, but we have certainly given fodder to many who wish to consult either the Ombudsman for consideration of administrative nature or the Integrity Commissioner for issues of whether we are actually abiding by what is our duty as a council. I think that what we need to look at is that if we ask this same question that we are debating right now of an issue of planning, what would be the impact? I think we're very, very lucky that this particular issue, whether it's an issue of ethics or legality, occurred only on a stone house that we have heard some reports is actually compromised, and then there is some doubt as to whether that's the case. I think we need to be very, very careful because this does lead to a problematic precedent in that we are saying that our minutes might not actually mean what the verbatim stated. And that is my understanding is what is at stake here. And it's not clear what the verbatim states in my mind right now. It's not a question of whether I agree or disagree. I can't vote on something where I don't have the certainty that it's accurate.
Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you. Just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding for the public record that the minutes for the September 30th meeting are online. The video is online. The audio is online. I'm looking at it right now. So any member of the public or any counselor can go to the normal place to get all of our minutes and retrieve it at any time. So they're publicly available and the record is public.
And they were read and shown on the screen for us 10 minutes ago. So,
regards to a point of order then, Mr. Mayor, they have been
sure,
up
go ahead.
for a scant less than 24 hours, and the question of what is reasonable would come up if anybody wished to take exception with these.
Okay. Thank you for that commentary. I'd really like to get to at least calling the vote because the vote determines where we go on this issue. And I'd like to actually do that. Either we're done or we look at doing something else. So, and that interests me. Councillor O'Rourke is the last on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Weiler's point about the short notice and the expectation that part-time counselors should be available within 24 hours, be able to go through all the emails, some of which arrived at 3 minutes before the beginning of the meeting, and to be prepared with this amount of notice to have the time to be watching the video again and transcribing. I mean, I had client work today. So put that piece aside. I certainly thought that we still needed 2/3 majority for the reconsideration. That was definitely my understanding given the conversation. I'm concerned now that going forward, if every time we have a motion up with the clauses indicated, we need to be going in and checking the procedural bylaw or the planning act or whatever else, we're going to be totally bogged down in second guessing and going and check the procedural bylaw and is this the right clause? So for me, I have to be able to rely on the conversation and the direction of the clerk. I don't think it's because I'm still a first-time counselor, but I really relied on that conversation and context. And I can't imagine going forward that we're all going to be checking the minutes of every meeting against the procedural bylaw or whatever act or bylaw we're talking about. So I'm really troubled by where that may lead. So I don't believe the clerk is in any way where I'm seeing, the word misled. I don't think anybody's trying to mislead anybody. I'm very concerned that, especially, if somebody's over the telephone, they can't even see what that item is on the screen. So, nor do we really need to be going back and listening to meetings over and over again to determine. I know that in that meeting, I thought that we needed a supermajority for reconsideration. And so I just wanted to say that I think it's unfortunate that we are talking about, well, individual intent. I know that's where my head was the other day, and I regret that we're here on this topic. I think it's important, and I think the transparency is important, but I don't believe there's any ill intent to correct the minutes.
Thank you. And Councillor Hoffman as well. I saw your hand. Go right ahead.
I'm just going to ask Stephen to put the motion up again. I feel really at a loss because I just want to state that, as everyone is aware, I wasn't at the meeting. And I'm finding what is being asked of me tonight to affirm proceedings. Certainly I can look at the video. I haven't had time to look at the video today. I've been gone since early this morning. So I think that when I hear that my colleagues were confused, I think, wow, people were confused and yet they were voting. So now I'm very confused, but I guess I would just like to see the motion again before the vote is called. And very similar to Councillor O'Rourke, very concerned about, yes, the transparency and the way this rolled out, having an emergency meeting. Last night, calling an emergency meeting and folks not, I would have liked to call some of my colleagues and had conversations, but yeah, I'm not appreciating the procedure, and I certainly don't want to point fingers at any of my colleagues. We all did our best job. We all did what we thought we were supposed to be doing, and I believe that the clerk was also doing his job. So those are just some comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to call the vote. And so I'll go to you. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor McKinnon. I saw your
Thanks.
hand.
Yeah, I actually had a few comments outside of point of orders.
All right.
So,
okay. Oh, Councillor Hoffman, we heard you laugh, so just make sure you're muted there, okay? It's a great laugh, by the way. We needed some levity, so that's good. Councillor McKinnon, you go ahead. Yeah.
I think the clerk has made it extremely clear about how minutes are formed based on not the letter of motions, not the exact phrasing, because many of us have given verbal motions that have typos in what we're saying. I think it's clear that there was a typo, a simple typo, that had the clerks intended and known that it was going to be suspending the rules and allowing it to be just a simple majority, clearly our clerks would have alerted council to that to make us aware, because they alert us when it's going to be a 9 vote, when it has to be a supermajority. So I don't think anyone let me correct that. I could not, with any kind of genuity, indicate that I did not know exactly what that vote was. It was extremely crystal clear through the entire thing, and forming the minutes based on what our professional staff anticipates the entirety of the meeting is, as clerk has already indicated, I think is the correct way to make minutes, because otherwise we are going to require every single motion to be written out explicitly and explained explicitly, and make sure that the verbal language perfectly matches the written language, which is clearly a ridiculous situation for us to be put in. So there, to me, there is no doubt everyone could have understood exactly what had happened at that meeting, what the intent was. And I think that it would be, I would not be showing the appropriate amount of grace to our staff to correct a typo, a simple typo, whenever they are looking at creating the meeting. So I certainly support affirming exactly what happened on September 30th, that the vote failed. And I'm hoping that the majority of council will agree with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll call the vote, and I'll start with you, Councillor Bell, on the phone. Again, we're not getting into anything to do with the building at all. This is just procedurally. Do you agree with confirming what occurred at the meeting on the 30th? 30th? Yes. So are you in favor or not?
I'm against.
Okay. And then Councillor Gibson, I need an audio from you.
I'm for affirming.
Okay. So then for the rest of us, I'm going to call in favor. Please show your hand if you're in favor of what occurred. There, I'll just yell out the names, okay? So it'd be Billings and Hofflin and Gawler and McKinnon and O'Rourke. So I'm sorry, I think it might be 6-6. Is it 6-6? Okay, so in the affirmative, I have Guthrie, Gibson, Billings, McKinnon, O'Rourke, and Gawler and Hofflin. Oh, so it's 7.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so against it would be Bell and Caron and Gordon and Alt and Downer. Okay, so that passes. We have confirmed that that's what occurred, and that clarity is there. I want to give the thank you. And now we're going to go to, I want to recognize Councillor Caron with a follow-up motion, and then Alt, please.
Thanks. I'm still in a little bit of shock, Mr. Mayor, as the mover of the motion. I'll get over that. However, I did send to you a follow-up motion. The public is watching this. The public needs to know what's going on. The public needs to know what we saw on September 27th. The public needs to be able to make a determination about whether we acted appropriately. And the public needs to understand how the motion of demolition came before council and what's at stake in the decisions that this council made with respect to the demolition. And the only way to do that is to make the staff report that was part of the closed session meeting of September 27th public. I have read through that staff report again. 98% of it is information that is should be public. Any information related to legal advice can be removed. Any information related to security of property is no longer relevant since demolition has proceeded and the property is currently a work site. So only information related to legal advice should be removed.
So
But
you have a motion. If you could, if you could put it, and we'll see if we can get a seconder, and then we can continue with the commentary. I just want to make sure that we're looking for that. And I know that you sent it, so Councillor Alt's going to second it. Sorry, I'm just procedurally want to make sure I get it on the floor.
No,
just finish your sentence there, or 3 or 4. Go ahead.
It was actually seconds from reading the motion. So
sorry. Yep.
This needs this report needs to be put into the open session. And Mr. Mayor, I understand the only way to do that is a council vote. So I would move that the staff report regarding 797 Victoria Road be released to the public with closed session information removed within 24 hours of this meeting. That should give our staff enough time to remove any legal advice and get this out into the public realm as quickly as possible.
Okay, so I want to thank you, and it is seconded and on the floor by yourself and Councillor Alt. I do have a question for staff, and then a quick comment. First of all, can staff actually pull the resources together in 24 hours? So I don't know who can, I guess Christopher Cooper or our CAO, because I guess legal would have to look it over, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's more than legal looking at this. We're all going to look at it because I want to make sure it's done properly. We have spent so much time on this file. I don't want another hiccup, 1 minute of it. So I'm struggling a little bit with committing to the 24 hours, not because I don't want to do it, Councillor Caron. I just want to make sure that we have the right people so that they can get at this tomorrow. With COVID, I don't know who's in the building, who's at home, who's on vacation. So if it was more like by end of week, that just gives us enough time to get to it, an end of week being Friday versus tomorrow. And then we fail because there was some people on vacation that needed to verify a section of that report. I think we can get at it and we'll do that. But if it just didn't say 24 hours, if it was within 48, that's just, then success happens. So I just offer that up as a commentary around. It's 5 o'clock. I don't know who's in tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. So Councillor Caron, I did see a thumbs up from your seconder. Are you okay with if I could just proceed? First of all, would you be okay if I looked to just procedurally ask that part to be removed and replaced with 48?
You know what? We managed to pull off an emergency council meeting with an agenda and a whole lot of background information within less than 24 hours. I'm willing to actually modify the report and get it to legal staff tomorrow morning by 9 a.m. myself to get this done. By Friday, Mr. Mayor, this farmhouse is gone. I can accept that. I can accept a democratic process. I can't accept a process that has failed. And I think the public needs to be able to scrutinize this decision before the last stone falls. And so
Councillor
I'm not willing
Caron,
to.
I'm with you. I just asked you
know
a
what?
question. Are you
I'm
okay
not-
with letting it stand at 24 and having a vote, or would you be willing to remove it
36.
after?
36. Go for 36. It has to
So
be
we're
out by
meeting in the
noon on
middle at
Friday.
36. Okay.
Noon on Friday. It has to
All
be
right.
out by noon on Friday. And I have two other motions if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I have to formally procedurally ask you to remove your motion, the original one of 24.
Yep, and place 36 hours on the floor.
Just let me finish, please. And our seconder has to remove it. You're okay? And now I have to procedurally go to all of council to hear or see if there's anybody that is okay, doesn't agree with that. Hearing and seeing none, I'm going back to you, Councillor Caron. Now your new motion says 36 hours. And Phil, Councillor Alt, are you okay with seconding that? Okay, so it's now back on the floor at 36. So that's the motion as it's going to stand. And is there anything further on that before I call the vote?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a comment.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
As is common with closed meeting minutes, releasing the report, and I'm going to vote in favor, but I just want this to be stated on the record as well. Releasing this report without the legal context is simply telling one side of the story and is unfair to the public. This is fanning the flames of the people who are supporting the conservation of the farmhouse without the proper context that council's been given. I feel like this is confirmation bias and nothing more. And I think that it's the wrong step. But if this is the step that's going to appease certain members of council, we can do it. But it is completely the biased opinion without the legal context, which most of us framed our opinions on.
All right, thank you. Is there anything back to the mover?
Yeah, just to clarify, I have read through that report. It's filled with information about the history of the home, about the history of how it came to be under a fire order. That is all information that is not subject to legal opinion, and it's not relevant to the discussion we had on demolition. It's actually really good information. It contains photographs of the site. It's information that should be in the public realm.
All right. And the only comment that I have before calling the vote is that I would just preface that and I'm going to vote in favor, so just put that on the floor. But to preface that when this is released, that the same position today is what was considered in camera originally is not fair. It's not fair, in my view. There is more context to it, and it's different from the 30th to today, and that needs to be recognized. So, but yeah, not a problem. I think because of actually the time frame, it is easier to allow the information at this point to be released, but it certainly wasn't when it originally happened. Okay, with that, Councillor Bell, I need an audio from you. Are you in favor?
Or
Great. And Councillor Gibson, I think you said you were going to vote in favor, but officially,
No,
are you in
I've changed
favor?
I've changed my mind. I don't think it's
Oh.
fair to do this, so I'm against.
Okay. And I'm going to go to the screen. All those in favor, please raise your hand for me. Okay, I see everyone except for McKinnon. So just to confirm, against, raise your hand. All right, so that passes. That passes, okay. Councillor Cron, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is again just a procedural item. Whenever we spoke in our original motion regarding the Municipal Register of Cultural Heritage Properties, we referred to the site as 790 Simon Victoria Road. I know I brought this to your attention, Mr. Mayor, that the Municipal Register actually lists the property as 774. So prior to removal from the register, that the register be amended to correct the address listing so that it reflects the proper address.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I think this is part of why we're here tonight, is that none of us knew it was on the register because it was
An incorrect address.
Incorrect address on the register. We have to correct that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Councillor Alt, I saw his hand go back up to thumbs up with a seconder. I'm totally in agreement with you. And I don't know, that's pretty straightforward vote. I think I could, Councillor Cron has explained it well. Councillor, can I go school the vote on this one, everybody? Yep. Councillor Bell, are you in favor of the correction of the address?
in favor.
Thank you. And I've lost Councillor Gibson. Is there another screen?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Gibson has left the meeting, as has Councillor Billings left the meeting.
Oh.
You'll have to check periodically on
okay, no problem.
Councillor.
Wait a second, do we have
Councillor Bell?
Okay.
Because obviously he's not visible.
So Councillor Bell always go to, he's in favor. So so this will be easier for me. All in favor on the screen, please raise your hand. That should be unanimous, I think. It is. Yeah, perfect. So it's unanimous. Councillor Cron, you have the floor. I think you said you might have another one, or no? I can't remember.
No, all done.
No. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Point of
that,
order,
then back to Councillor Alt. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. It's a very important point of order as well. As we have passed what, for all intents and purposes, are the minutes of the special meeting, I think it was the 27th of September, through you to the clerk. Do we need to pass them again? That strikes me as redundant. We have now approved those minutes, so what's our status?
To the clerk, if you want to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion that was carried earlier this afternoon referenced draft minutes. We prepare minutes after a meeting in draft form. We post them online for transparency. Council then ratifies minutes at a later meeting. As you've sort of sensed from my approach, I'm very much a fan of following the standard process and order and routine of council, and so I think it's probably best in that regard to have those minutes come back to a later meeting. The timing when they land is It could be next week once the minutes are finalized. It could be end of the month, but that's usually our process. We bring them back to a subsequent meeting in that regard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. O'Brien as well. So the interesting thing about this is these minutes could be amended, and we could actually see. I have to be theoretical on this. We could see a different vote count, or we could actually see a complete reversal on these minutes. We're missing one counselor, and we do not know which way that individual would vote, or whether anybody might have a second thought. I think we have another concern, but I'll certainly leave that to the clerk's office to consider.
I would say that
what
Councillor Alt is, sorry, apologies through you, Mr. Mayor. What Councillor
Yep.
Alt is referencing is true for every any set of minutes. They could be changed by council at any time. I think council should be aware of and wary of the motion that you carried tonight in the affirmative. But
you'd almost need a notice of, sorry to interrupt, but notice of reconsideration of this vote, which applies to the minutes, but
alternatively,
I don't know.
if there's an interest, again, we're in a duly constituted meeting of council, albeit under section 8.1D, an emergency and extraordinary special council meeting. You still can approve minutes at this meeting, but again, I fall back on what is standard process for council, what we've always done, and try not to deviate from that. Hence my comments earlier tonight would be to bring minutes to a subsequent meeting. But I will, as always, I will defer to you, Mayor Guthrie, as chair, and all of council.
No,
Thank
okay.
you, Mr. O'Brien.
Councillor Alt still has the floor. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I'm not trying to be difficult or mischievous. It just struck me that we are doing a redundant approval of the minutes, and that could lead to some concerns.
And I guess the only commentary I would make based on that commentary is that you know, it's upon all of us for no mischievous things to occur then when that comes back to us as a consideration for approving the minutes. So with that, thank you, colleagues, and to the public, and my goodness, this is something that has been very trying on all of council, and I will say as me as chair. To navigate through this. So I appreciate the time and the urgency of the matter and the will of council. With that, I'll ask for bylaws, please, to be confirmed. Would someone like to move that for me, please? Councillor O'Rourke is moving and seconded by Councillor McKinnon and Councillor Bell, just for an audio vote for you for the bylaws.
For.
Okay, and on the screen, in favor, please raise your hands. Those in favor? Okay, so we have Guthrie, keep them up for me, Guthrie, O'Rourke, Hoffland, Goller, McKinnon. And so against the bylaws are Downer and Alt and Gordon and Caron. The bylaws pass. And a vote to adjourn, please. Someone move that for me. Councillor McKinnon, Councillor Caron is seconding for adjournment. Councillor Bell, audio vote on adjournment.
For.
Thank you. And on the screen for adjournment. And that looks unanimous to me. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. And do have a good rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.